Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our weekly trade and tariff briefing. I am Matt Wonderly, Director of Investments, Services, and Business Advisory at World Trade Center, Utah, and I have the pleasure of facilitating today's conversation. If you're here for the first time, this weekly webinar series is intended to provide you with the latest information about trade and tariffs. You can view previous webinars on our YouTube channel and find updates to our tariff dashboard on our website, which we'll link in the chat for you. Today, we're excited to hear first from Ben Collender, Chief of Staff at World Trade Center, Utah, about updates to the WTC Utah Tariff Dashboard. We will then have the pleasure of hearing from Daniel Mabey, Asia President and Director of Strategic Markets from United Natural Products Alliance, or UNPA, about the natural products industry and the foreign trade zone. So let's get started. Ben, I'll pass it over to you for a bit. Ben, I think you're still on mute.
That was bound to happen eventually. Thanks for the heads up. So this is our tariff dashboard. Many people are familiar with it at this point, but this is where we track all of our latest updates on our tariffs, wtcutah.com/tariffs. So you can follow along with me here if you like. It also has a link to these webinars that you can send around if folks are interested in attending that who may have questions about tariffs. It's a good platform for businesses to address their questions. So we have a few updates this week. I'm going to start by going down some 232 tariffs that were a little bit of a surprise. They were on the BIS page, if I can find them here. They were actually, so we're burying them down quite low on the dashboard because they were released. The tariffs were open for investigation on September 9th, but they did not end up on the BIS website until just earlier this week. So those 232 tariffs are specifically focused on robotics and industrial machinery, as well as personal protective equipment, medical consumables, and medical equipment. So right now that we're estimating a time frame anywhere between October of this year, depending on how fast they're going to fast track that. I mean, that's a little early in the process to probably put tariffs in, but all the way up until May 30th of 2026. Typically, these 232 tariffs take about 9 months for implementation, but we've seen some of these come through a bit quicker in this administration. So those are two important ones to highlight. The public comment, if you're involved in either of these two tariffs, is open until October 17th. And just a reminder, it's interesting or businesses may be interested in commenting because the federal government looks through these comments and has to take every substantive comment seriously. So if you're looking for legal recourse down the road, or really need your comment heard or some awareness brought to the government, this is the forum to do it. Oftentimes we'll have a meeting and ask us for considerations in talking to the government or this or that. This is really the true public forum that companies need to consider. And there's oftentimes a public option and a non-public option for each of these tariffs. So those are the 232 tariffs on robotics and personal protective equipment. Again, public comment open until October 17th. We also have, if everyone recalls, the Liberation Day tariffs on April 2nd of last year. That was coordinated around a report that was released by USTR on global trade barriers. So we have, I'm looking through where this is on here. I will find it, but it's a little bit further down as well in terms of a USTR trade barriers report that's coming out for 2026, not 2025, but next year. It's probably going to come out again in the spring. Public comments are open right now, and you can find it on our dashboard, but I don't want to scroll through while I'm talking to identify the specific line item, but it's on there. Comments are open until October 30th. And so you want to be sure to get those comments in If you have an issue in another country that is preventing your good from going into that country, we've heard a few of these that we've sent to different countries for consideration in this report and these deals. So another just couple of housekeeping things to make everyone aware of, and this is just our rundown of the calendar. I'm going to keep it brief today, but we just mentioned the 232 tariffs for personal protective equipment and robotics that are closing on the October 17th. We've got public comment on the trade report we just talked about that is closing on October 30th. But these are the ones I really want to mention almost every webinar until they come up, because they're so significant in terms of international trade. But the four I'm going to list really, or the three I'm going to list really quickly: USMCA public comment on the renegotiation of USMCA. That is open until November 3rd. We've got another thing to mark on all of your calendars. This is going to be the most significant milestone in terms of what will the Supreme Court or the wider court system do about these cases. The Supreme Court oral arguments are set for November 5th. And so keep an eye out, stream that. We'll be sure to get out more information on that in terms of how to do it in future webinars. But either paying attention to that live, keeping an eye on the news that comes out, or after the oral arguments. Again, I got to plug SCOTUS Tunes every time. It's a great format to listen to Supreme Court arguments in cartoon format. So, and finally, the last thing before I hand it over to Daniel is the China truce. And this is going to be relevant also in part for our conversation today, is slated to end on November 10th. As we know, this always is subject to further extension or discussion, but right now the truce is slated to end, and we're looking to see if a deal comes in place prior to November 10th for what those tariffs will look like long-term on China. So with that, I'm going to stop and hand it back to you, Matt.
Excellent. Thanks, Ben. It's great information, great data. With that said, without further ado, I think it's time to really pass it over to Daniel. And Daniel, maybe start by introducing yourself and also the UNPA.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you to World Trade Center Utah for this opportunity and for working with us over the past year, really, to kind of look at utilizing the FTZ for our specific use case. So the United Natural Products Alliance is an industry association of about 100 dietary supplement companies that include contract manufacturers, brand holders, laboratory groups, analytical labs. We work internationally with many groups through MOU partnerships. That includes partnerships in China, in Europe, and other markets. And the founder of UNPA, Lauren Israelson, is really kind of one of the, you could kind of call him like a godfather of the industry. He founded UNPA in 1992 and worked with Senator Orrin Hatch to pass the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act of 1994. That is the current statute that regulates our industry. So Utah really has a deep background in the nutritional dietary supplement industry. And myself, I joined and met Lauren about 10 years ago, and we started working together while I was living in China. I have first of all, I'm from Utah originally. I studied abroad in China, learned Chinese. I spent about 13 years in China in total, working with UNPA and also working on a 5-year partnership with the U.S. Commerce Department's International Trade Administration. It's called a Market Development Cooperative Program. It's a competitive grant program. It actually just finished, and this was really to address trade standards, non-tariff trade barriers, trade deficits kind of within our specific industry. And we, during that time, worked a lot with Chinese free trade zones, which are analogous to our foreign trade zones, but quite different, in fact. And just to kind of give you an idea, the Chinese free trade zones are very, very sophisticated, and they're really supported by the provincial governments. They're kind of walled in, bonded, physically bonded facilities that are big. I mean, a few square miles in size sometimes. Currently, cross-border e-commerce, which a lot of American consumer products go through to be exported to China, actually go through the free trade zones in China. And there's a lot of compliance requirements that US companies have to fulfill to enter the China market and its FTZ system, including directly interfacing with the national single window in China. This was a big deal a few years back, where companies really have to be very, very compliant to be able to enter into the China market. Before, it was much more of a kind of gray market in some ways. There was a lot of what was called Daigo, where Chinese travelers or students studying abroad would take products back to China, sell those on e-commerce, and China really streamlined this compliance system for cross-border e-commerce. So from that vantage point, I moved back to the US about a year and a half ago, and we're really looking at the foreign trade zones now to help increase the competitive nature of our industry internationally, to help streamline the supply chain. Just to give you an example, the US dietary supplement industry is about $70 billion in value. Here in the state of Utah, it's about $13 billion. And according to a University of Utah report that came out a few years ago, it actually supports close to 40,000 jobs in the state. So this is a big industry for the state. Right now, the supply chain really is just not up to spec. We have lots of intermediaries, lots of brokers in between the suppliers and the foreign suppliers and the US clients. We're very much dependent on a foreign supply chain. About 80% of our ingredients come from China. One of the big problems right now is a lot of brokers or ingredient manufacturers. They will aggregate a lot of the smaller suppliers' ingredients and materials and reissue COAs, certificates of analysis, to then sell them here in the US market. So the chain of custody of these products a lot of times is not clear. Bigger companies in our industry are very compliant because they have the team and resources to really facilitate kind of transparency within their supply chain, ensuring that companies are compliant with the Food Safety Modernization Act. Unfortunately, though, most companies, I would say 70 to 80%, are buying through brokers based either in California, New Jersey. There's a few hotspots like this. We really want to help to build direct supplier relationships using the foreign trade zone, and then embedding a compliance protocol and testing protocol in this system. So we really believe that the foreign trade zones could really provide a ton of economic value. First of all, FTZs allow for the re-exported products without paying any duties on those imported inputs. We also see the advantage of the MPF, the merchandise processing fee, where you can basically stack your entries into weekly entry, bring it into the FTZ. And so right now we're working with our partners to set up a FTZ warehouse. One of our partners already has a facility in California that we might first activate as a foreign trade zone facility. And then we will look to establish a foreign trade zone facility here in Utah, and then work with Chinese suppliers that are pre-qualified. So we're going to require them to undergo annual third-party audits by recognized certifiers like NSF, USB, Eurofins, SGS, Intertech, the big global laboratory and inspection groups, and then also work with those groups to implement a testing protocol. So we will be testing in China before these products are exported to the US foreign trade zone facility. And then we will also be doing confirmation testing on those ingredients in the foreign trade zone facility. What's great about Utah is we can really have this in an ecosystem here. So we have laboratory groups in Salt Lake, right near the airport. We have very large contract manufacturers that would benefit from this. We have a lot of brand holders, some with manufacturing capabilities, others without. And also working with e-commerce accelerators to help boost their exports to foreign markets. Pattern, as everybody knows, is a big exporter of dietary supplements to China and other markets. I also work with a few other e-commerce accelerators as a part of our program with the US Commerce Department. And our kind of broader vision is really to build this consortium-based framework. So just to go back once again, is that it's combining the FTZ infrastructure with pre-qualified suppliers on a consignment model. So these suppliers will actually just be placing their ingredients in our warehouse. We will not take ownership of these ingredients. So it's a pretty not too capital intensive business that we're standing up. And then also to work to utilize the FTZ to create those synergies of whether it's MPF, tariff inversion, re-exporting of products. This is really what we want to see. And I think that the dietary supplement industry is a great use case because, as I mentioned, we're highly dependent on foreign inputs. We have big export markets. And so the foreign trade zone really just makes sense to anchor this new supply chain protocol. And so, there's a lot of other detail that goes into this. This is something we've really kind of been envisioning for quite a period of time, working with our partners, both here in the US as well as in China. We have a lot of support from our colleagues in China, actually, to also do this through the various chambers of commerce that we work with. And those are all affiliated with the Ministry of Commerce in China. So what we're really trying to do is basically create this recognized framework of trade standards within the nutritional and supplement industry so that, for example, US companies also re-exporting their products to China, if they're US Pharmacopoeia verified or NSF Sport certified, that those products could potentially have broader market access in the China market in the future. Because we're really making the point that this is about reciprocal trade relations. And right now, it's just simply not reciprocal. It's probably about like sevenfold in terms of what China exports to us in terms of raw ingredients and the finished US products going back to China. So that's just kind of a general overview, and happy to answer any questions.
Daniel, I want to ask one, and I'm going to jump in above Matt here and just say, you guys are really sophisticated at what you're doing. What you're doing is probably going to bring back a considerable amount of manufacturing in this industry. A lot of companies we talk to or work with are thinking about the foreign trade zone in terms of the impact to their own individual company. How do I have this on my site? And what's different in what your approach is you're not just thinking about the foreign trade zone for one particular company, but rather an ecosystem, and UNPA serving as a go-between for different inputs and coordinating the zone to zone with no tariffs as it gets processed and manufactured. So it's a really interesting way of looking at the foreign trade zone and how to serve an industry association. What might you have in terms of guidance for a company who wants to take on an ecosystem-driven approach, or looking at it beyond just their company? What approach would you have in your experience and what you guys have been talking about at UNPA to sort of bridge the individual company mindset versus a wider ecosystem mindset?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, I always look at the auto industry as an example, what BMW and Mercedes-Benz have done with the foreign trade zones here in the US. They've streamlined suppliers where, a lot of their inputs are coming from Europe, but they're manufacturing here in the US, re-exporting a lot of those vehicles to South America. So I think within your own industry, you have to really evaluate the supply chain kind of from a very macro viewpoint. And if most of your inputs that you're manufacturing with are foreign sourced, but if there are a lot of trading companies and intermediaries in the middle, you really need to look at how can you work to streamline the supply chain so that standards align, that there's clear, particularly in food industries, a clear chain of custody, point to point, who has their hands on these products, where is it flowing? These are all the questions I think that industries really need to be looking at. And then, I think probably the hardest thing is really trying to build that consensus among, industry participants. And I think that's where associations like UMPA really can provide a lot of value, and the World Trade Center Utah, in fact, is that bringing together multiple parties that have different beneficial aspects to their work, whether it's testing, compliance, manufacturers, to bring them together into kind of a forum where you can begin to discuss these problems and how to begin to envision a more kind of 21st century supply chain protocol. So they're bigger questions you have to ask at first, and then begin to narrow down on the specifics.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Daniel. And I want to go back to sticking with the supply chain, but first, the 40,000 jobs, that's pretty incredible. And so this isn't going away anytime soon. It's not a small industry. Do you see your companies that you're working with looking to diversify supply chains out of China, looking at other Asian countries for sourcing or beyond that? What does that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of companies, even before this current Trump administration, were really looking to India as a foreign supplier. But now, with trade relations with India, that it's also in flux right now. Actually, it's very difficult to really assess, if companies are really going to look for new suppliers, what markets could supply at the volume that they need. And a lot of times, actually, there's a lot of transshipping that goes on in our industry as well. So, you could be purchasing ingredients from an Indian supplier, but actually it could be from China originally. Those are all a lot of problems. And just to give you kind of a broader context, I forgot to mention this as well, is that this critical nutrient supply chain, so we can kind of narrow it a little bit, not all the dietary supplement ingredients, but this is really critical for even kind of like nutritional or national security, because the vitamins, amino acids, minerals, these don't only go into our products, they go into medical health foods, they go into infant formula, they go into animal feed, they go into MREs for the military. I mean, this is something I think that, at least in our use case, Utah could really be a standout in terms of realigning the supply chain and also creating the synergies needed to make our companies more competitive in the global market.
So I also have another question. It's also a good reminder that if you have questions, feel free, if you're attending, to drop it in the Q&A. But one question I have is, we talk a lot about how to help companies go on offense, right? Like if you're doing these unique approaches in this tariff environment, you've got to think through like what's best for your company, your strategy, what are your competitors doing, how do you respond and go on offense, right? If say we have natural products companies on this webinar and they're not already plugged into the effort and they're like, this is interesting, how do they get in contact with you guys at UMPA and start to participate in what this looks like?
Sure. So great question. We're actually planning to join the World Trade Center Utah, I'm happy to say, starting December 1st. And then we are going to plan to work with you guys to do quarterly seminars for the Utah industry, to first of all, educate them a bit on some of the current supply chain issues, and also make available the offerings that we will have in our consortium-based warehouse. So we're not fully operational yet, but by Q1, we will pretty much be up and running. And we welcome not just UMPA members, but the entire Utah industry to get involved in this. And it's not that we're basically saying that, this is how the supply chain is going to be built. This is really a effort of all industry participants. We'll lean heavily on our analytical laboratory groups here in Utah to help us with testing on the compliance side, and some of our more well-versed trading partners, they can give us a ton of input into how to best streamline the supply chain. So this is really a multi-party effort. And we look forward to having conversations with the entire Utah industry.
And we do have our email in the group chat as well. So feel free to email us and we can collect your information. So it's in the chat, info@wtcutah.com, and we can collect that and make you a part of that effort as well.
Great.
I want to remind everybody that you can ask questions in the chat. Don't be bashful if you have anything to ask. But I'll throw this out there to you, Daniela. We have a few minutes left while we're waiting for anyone to think of a question. I think you said 17 billion of the 70 is coming from Utah. That's
13 billion
13
of the
billion.
70. Yeah, that's correct.
Maybe it's my hearing dyslexia or something, but 13 billion of that 70, that's pretty impressive and quite competitive. How do you see the FTZ really increasing that competitiveness for Utah-based companies?
Yeah, I think actually the FTZ, in addition to the inland port, if we can really kind of build those logistics efficiencies, have the FTZ efficiencies, I think we can attract even more companies to Utah. I actually was just speaking with a company based in Washington State. They're looking to relocate their manufacturing to Ogden. Actually, here in Ogden, I actually live in Ogden. In the business depot here in Ogden, I mean, there's already a great group of contract manufacturers and its own little ecosystem up here, but also Salt Lake, down at Point of the Mountain, Lehigh, Provo. I mean, the whole Wasatch Front is really opportune to take advantage of the FTZ and really work to build on those synergies of the FTZ and cutting out the brokers in the supply chain, which will really help with the cost of ingredients as well. So I think that we're in this to support Utah. We're also in it to support the national industry, but I really think this could be an example for the state and an industrial ecosystem that it would be hard to replicate in other states because we really do have everything right here.
Brilliant, brilliant. It could increase really the foreign direct investment attraction to the state.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. Well, are there any other questions? Here, we got one in the Q&A here, I think. Oh, thank you. I was looking at the wrong tab. No wonder I couldn't see it.
Oh,
Here, let me ask this question for you, Daniel. How do you balance the job opportunities you are talking about with our low unemployment rate and immigration reduction?
Good question. I'll look to maybe Ben also to help answer. I think that there's a lot of talent here in the state, that a lot of people, there's currently 40,000 people employed in the industry, but a lot of people who have been around this industry, previously worked in this industry. So I do think that our human resources in the state are quite excellent. I don't really think that having the low unemployment rate will be too much of an issue. It could, drive costs a little bit higher, but to hire talent and the people who have the background. But I think it's not too big of a problem in my mind.
Yeah, Matt, we have another question as well. Maybe we take that since we've got about 2 minutes left.
Yeah, I was just gonna pull that up. Thanks. So Daniel, can you elaborate more on the quarterly presentations and meetings that you mentioned you would be doing in conjunction with World Trade Center Utah after you join up in December?
Yeah, so the quarterly webinars, we're really going to make this a series of very informative webinars, bring in excellent really top-notch experts covering whether it's manufacturing, testing, auditing, suppliers. We'll also coordinate this with the China Chamber of Commerce for import and export of medicines and health products. That's the big group that we work with in China. They will also have suppliers fly in for this, present on the ingredients that they manufacture, some of our work on standards. So we're really going to make this an informative session for everybody, and each quarter will be somewhat different. We'll have different speakers, potentially speakers from FDA or ITA even, to speak about FTZs. So we really want to make this pretty broad-based, and then also really hone in on what are the needs of the local industry, what ingredients are needed, what supply chain problems companies are had, and we'll have really a forum where we can begin to digest some of those problems that companies are having.
That's brilliant. Well, that puts us at the top of the hour at 10 o'clock. We really appreciate you, Daniel and Ben, for taking time to speak with us today. And thanks to everyone who tuned in this week. Great questions as well. Thank you for participating. Please keep an eye on the World Trade Center Utah's communication channels and website for any additional information and updates to the tariff dashboard, along with upcoming events as well. If you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to send us an email, which we've also dropped into the chat. And thanks again, everyone. We hope to see you again next Friday.